Chapter 46-32. The streamlined divine pattern is like a flowing river, rising and flowing with the end of the sword. An old statue like a clay statue suddenly opened his eyes and looked at his back, then went silent again. Then Feng Qi, after perceiving Jian Wushuang's breath fluctuation, also awakened from deep sleep. What the is this guy, haven't even woke up yet? Feng Qi looked puzzled, far enough to watch Jian Wushuang far away before giving up. As the years went by, the sword-like long river flowing around Jian Wushuang became even more pure, like a star emitting a blue glow. His breath was even longer, and he spit out a sip slowly every 100 years. And that layer of emptiness is gradually weakening. The monks who gathered to come to the extraterritorial battlefield gradually fixed themselves at 5 million people. The base camp is not enough to allow all monks to settle down, and the Bloodwave Supreme will be able to lead the Dragon and Phoenix family to expand. Nearly 60 magnificent big cities have become the Archguard, and they have risen around the base camp. All monks are waiting. It's been more than 1,000 years, and the talent of Yi Jian Wushuang should also wake up. The Overlord thought and felt his chin. The Patriarch's ancestor, White Ape, patted him angrily. You thought it was so easy to eat and drink water for the promotion of Invincible Realm. I think it took a dozen chaotic periods to promote the Invincible Realm of the old man. The Overlord touched his head. I have a feeling that Jian Wushuang will wake up soon. The White Ape didn't speak again, and looked forward to Jian Wushuang's back. Little guy, don't break through that invincible state. In these 1,000 years, the battlefield outside the region is not peaceful. As a scout pioneer, the vagrants constantly broke through the cracks, trying to find out the situation. Bloodwave Supreme has long been prepared. Each 100 Supremes are one echelon, a total of 10 echelons, and a total of 1,000 Supremes are stationed in the cracks. As more scouts rushed out of the cracks, and frictions increased from small to large, every monk was vaguely aware that the worldwide catastrophe battle was about to start. At the same time, Bloodwave Supreme did not forget to complete the previous deployment of Jian Wushuang. The two dragons, the Dragon Clan who had just been promoted to the semi-ancestor level, and the two Dragonchis led the team, and kept clearing the vagrants stationed in the divine universe. The systems practiced by the two sides of the universe are different, and the restriction of virtual forces has also caused the virtual men of the virtual universe to go too far. This also greatly saves time and the degree of casualties. After processing all the things, the Supreme Master of Bloodwaves got tired from the base camp so far. He hasn't rested much for more than 1,000 years, even the semi-ancestor's body is a bit sick. The Heavenly Supreme and the Great Axe accompanied him. You said, how long will it take for the Master of the Wushuang Palace to wake up from go sit? Tian Yarrow Supreme said. The Great Axe shook his head. It's hard to say, Invincible Supreme is a genius. With the horrible qualifications of the Master of the Wushuang Palace, I'm afraid it will be more difficult to break through than us. Bloodwave Supreme laughed. Both of you guessed wrong. In my opinion, there are at most 2 years left, and the Master of the Shuangsong Palace can wake up. Looking at the extremely bloodless Supreme, the two nodded with smiles. Sure enough, in the second year of the scene, the sword unparalleled sitting under the wordless monument, suddenly wake up. The long flowing river of godlike patterns is flowing like a clear stream of air, translating into billions of stars. The unclear road rules in the battlefield outside the territory are reshaped, and Baoguang rises and rises around the sword unparalleled. The dim and broken void was rarely clear for a moment, and a special rule of avenue blessed him. In the base camp, all the Invincible Supremes at this moment, all looked at the scene that washed up the lead. Every Invincible Supreme was shocked. They clearly remembered how terrible the thunder and punishment that came when they were first admitted to the Invincible Supreme, and they would be embarrassed in the carelessness of promotion. But why is this promotion to Invincible Supreme different from their methods? As if the Emperor was crowned, the supreme divine punishment of thunder and thunder turned into a monstrous divine power slowly falling, and the vast divine power Huaman was bathed in 1,000,000 miles around. At this moment, all the magic weapons worn by monks trembled slightly like worship. Looking at the figure hanging in the sky like a round sun, everyone who knew the sword without a smile smiled. This guy who has stood up to adversity and ran all the way so far has really not disappointed anyone. Belonging to the invincible Supreme Avenue, Jian Wushuang's dazzling divine pattern slowly restrained. Standing with Lan Lan in all coldness, seeing this scene, could not help tears. It was his husband and his pride. As the divine power slowly dissipated, the frost was too cold to hold back, ready to rush forward. However, a magnificent flaming figure took the lead in front of Jian Wushuang and cast a gratifying and admiring look. Cold as frosty ice, footsteps stayed where they were. "What are you doing? Don't you want your husband?" Lan Lan on the side chuckled, then grabbed the frosty wrist, and rushed to shung Jian Wushuang with everyone. "Sure enough, I didn't let this seat down. It was just 1,000 years before I could break through the invincible realm. It was really a monster." Feng Qi nodded with satisfaction. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. "It's a fluke." Feng Qi also said, "In the beginning, you could suppress the semi-ancestors in a half-step invincible supreme state. Now it is invincible supreme. I don't think it has changed as much as you think," Jian Wushuang said. While talking, the Life Shrine, the Dragon and Phoenix clan, and some powerful monks gathered. Looking at so many monks now, Jian Wushuang did not respond for a moment. Bloodwave Supreme laughed, and then meticulously explained what happened over the past 1,500 years to Jian Wushuang. Until the final words, Jian Wushuang slowly returned to God, whispered, "This is the monks assembled, the monks of the divine universe." The few people remaining in the Temple of Life were all filled with emotion. From the beginning of the single tree, to the joining of the Dragon and Phoenix clan, and now to the assembly of nearly 5 million monks, everything is like a dream to Jian Wushuang. He never dared to expect this situation, and his heart was surging for a while. 5 million monks assembled here just to break through under the weight of the virtual universe. The nearly 200,000 Supreme Masters are almost all the chi of the divine universe. This battle cannot be lost, nor can it be lost. But among the monks who gradually gathered in front of the monument, a slight commotion suddenly sounded, and then the crowd gradually separated to the sides, leaving a way. The two strong breaths made everyone look down. Chapter 46-33. The two statues that came slowly were breathtaking and restrained, and the statues were all hidden under the wide black robe. With only one glance, Jian Wushuang clearly felt that these two figures were semi-ancestors. The atmosphere in front of the monument was condensed, and the needle drop was audible. Bloodwave Supreme is also a little dazed. He doesn't know when there are two semi-ancestors in the assembled monk army. Judging by the surging breath, I'm afraid it wasn't for the congratulations. Bloodwave Supreme did not neglect, and hurried forward to the front road. "Who are the two?" The two reached down and pulled down their hoods at the same time, each showing an old face. "The light is the light, the short is the waist." The two oldest elders spoke at the same time, their voices were slightly muffled. "They are really too old, as if the chaos had only existed since the beginning of the day, and the bloodwave almost couldn't find the breath they didn't deliberately hide. We are the old friends of the universe. We should have entered the cycle already, but in the end we couldn't, rest assured. We borrowed some chi from the universe to wish our last strength." The two old men spoke at the same time, their voices were peaceful. Jian Wushuang heard the words and arched, "Thank you two old elders for their help, and the Palace of Life is grateful." The two elders bowed their heads slightly, turning their gaze from Bloodwave Supreme to him. "Are you the master of the Palace of Life?" Sword Wushuang nodded. "You can reach the invincible and supreme state at this age, and the afterlife is awesome." The thinner Xiangqing old man nodded, but he immediately turned his head. "But the old man thought that you led the Palace of Life to lead the next. The war was not a good move." As soon as the words came out, people who knew each other with swordsman Wu Jian looked at him. The Emperor Jinwu and Emperor Taishu were all looking at him from the wall, watching how he dealt with it. Jian Wushuang didn't care, and laughed. "What do the old seniors think? It's very simple. The Lord of the Palace of Life Shrine was surrendered and was won by the semi-ancestors in this seat," said the relatively sturdy Xiang Liang. Jian Wushuang heard the words and did not speak. Feng Qi, the ancestor of the Feng tribe, even chuckled. "I quit and did not participate in the competition of Larozizi. When the Dragon Emperor came to the river, the same should be said. At present, The dragon enemy does not want to participate in that unnecessary competition. In my opinion, the responsibility of the shrine is left to the master of the warrior's palace. The two half-ancestors, Longyu and Long Kai, also took a step back and stood behind the Emperor Linhe. When Bloodwave Supreme opened his mouth with the light and desolate old man, he had no good feelings. He pressed his heart into anger and said coldly, "The Lord of the Wushuang Palace is the successor designated by the previous Lord of the Daoyang Palace. No one can change this." At one time, 5 of the 7 semi-ancestors on the field rejected directly. And the 2 old men who are light and desolate are still calm. This battle is about the life and death of the divine universe. As an old friend of the God of God, I will never watch the divine universe interrupt in his hand, so the old man must never don't budge. He is just an invincible supreme. Although he is extremely talented, he looks like an ant in the eyes of the semi-ancestors, not to mention that the virtual universe has real ancestors like the virtual God. How much can he play? Strength is an insurmountable sound of nature. The low voice cut through the entire battlefield outside the region, and the two were in the light of the other and directly released the breath that belongs to the semi-ancestor class. For a time, nearly 1 million monks gathered in front of Wubi Bay, all infected by the words of the two. Yeah, even if his roots are even better, after all, he is only an invincible supreme. Even the semi-ancestors may not be able to take over. How can he lead the magical universe to win this battle? After hearing the last sentence of the two, Feng Qi couldn't help but laugh out loud, and the other half-ancestors were also full of weird faces. Between all realms is a ridge of gully, but Zhen Wushuang is obviously not in this list. Even if Feng Qi, who has already achieved a semi-ancestor level, first thought of Zhen Wushuang when confronting Zhen Wushuang for the first time, it was not but how to escape. The scene where the daring half-step invincible state shakes the virtual is too shocking. However, Zhen Wushuang did not respond very much. After listening to these words, he slowly said, "Old senior, what if I don't give up my place in the palace? The old man will only force you to make way." Afterwards, the two most pure and powerful divine powers emerged, and the divine power belonging to the semi-ancestor class shocked most monks in an instant. Don't blame the old man just doesn't want to see the divine power universe going to destruction. Xiong Qing and Xiong Liu said in the same voice. When the blood wave reached the words, when he was about to take a step, he was stopped by Zhen Wushuang. "I will handle it properly, rest assured." After that, Zhen Wushuang took a step forward, and the vast and mighty spirit of the invincible realm also surged up. The rising divine power turned out to be faint and light, and the two Liu Xiong resisted each other. In this case, the main sword of the Palace of Life is unparalleled and willing to be taught. The two didn't talk much, they set foot on the line, and the power of the semi-ancestors was heavy toward Zhen Wushuang. Nearly 1 million monks gathered voluntarily yielded, leaving a large void. Dare to cope with the existence of the semi-ancestors in the invincible realm, is that kid crazy? The pupil of Emperor Taishu condensed suddenly and couldn't believe what he was about to see. With one enemy and two, is there no problem with Zhen Wushuang? The overlord was shocked and murmured softly. At this moment, everyone has determined the final situation in their hearts. Only the disciples of Life Shrine who participated in that war had a look of indifference, as if they had seen through the ending. Bloodwave Supreme said quietly, "Stop fighting with war may be the best choice right now." The two semi-ancestral breaths of the sharp edge, once locked up, locked the sword's retreat, and strived to defeat it in one way. Wushuang's verdant green vine is centered on two people. Yu reads www.ukanshu.com spreads around all of a sudden, and it is built by their dojo field. In this area, enemies can be cut substantially directly. The sword has no two-sided color and calmness. Looking at the scene right now, I couldn't help but hook the corner of my mouth. A layer of dim and imperceptible breath quietly climbed over the entire void. The gifted magical power of the sword unparalleled, the primitive universe, has concealed everyone's eyes. Today's gifted supernatural powers, and even the rest of the supernatural powers, have been retempered by Zhen Wushuang in this 1,000 years of enlightenment. Even the strongest ancestors still fell into the field of sword unparalleled. For the magical universe, We must not keep our hands, be careful. Xiong Qing said, while a huge vine sprang up from the realm, rushing towards the sword Wushuang. Chapter 46-34. The divine power rising from the sky is like a mountain overturning. Even the invincible supreme here is subconsciously taking a half-step back to avoid spreading to himself. It's time to end. Taishu Emperor whispered, but then the most unwilling scene in that heart appeared. I saw Jian Wushuang still standing in place, exhaling a mighty taro sword with a mighty sword. Dash with a slight whistle, the mountain-like vines split directly into the middle. Jian Wushuang didn't stay at all, stood up directly, holding the Tai Luo divine sword in his hand, facing the two who were light, and the two were desolate, suddenly cut off. The majestic and vast sword-like tears of the void, like a giant wave, fell directly. The two waved their hands at the same time, and numerous vines formed barriers to stop them. Hao Feng Feng Jian Yi easily tore off nearly 100 layers of barriers, and then gradually dispersed. Sword Wushuang turned back and stood with his hands, looking calm. Look at each other lightly and stare at each other, and then condensed, being able to be the lord of the palace of life at this age, it really has some skills, but your skills are still not enough for us. More immense divine power surging, impregnating the divine powers of countless chaos ages, more inclusive and broad. The intangible half-ancestor's breath surging into the void, transfiguring the transparent chain vines, twitching toward the sword unparalleled like a punishment. Taking a deep breath, he retracted the sacred sword again, carrying his hands to face the heavenly punishment, step by step towards the light and the desert. The chain vine carrying the might of heaven and earth slammed heavily on Jian Wushuang's body, and the imaginary body disappeared. Each hit had a semi-ancestor's full blow, leaving no trace of him at all. Huang God pattern emerges from the sword's unparalleled body, and the purple Sichuan word demon anomalies in the eyebrows. Xiong Qingxiang can't believe that this guy who is just invincible, how could he be able to withstand the whipping in their field? You know, even the semi-ancestors are afraid to do this. Maybe I don't want to waste any more time. Jian Wushuang is holding the sky with one hand, and the heavenly gate of one is coming. Quality realm Tianmen, which is more solid than before, seems to really exist. The divine power projected from each beam seems to be the most fiery day. All monks are watching this scene in shock. That is not the power that Invincible Supreme can radiate, or even the semi-ancestors may not be able to comprehend it. After seeing the vast expanse that was discovered in the splendid Skygate, Xiangqing and Xianghuang gave up the resistance directly, and looked at the sword unparalleled. The light of the polar day let all monks in front of the inscriptionless tablet close their eyes subconsciously. When the polar day disappeared, everything was over. Jian Wushuang stood in front of Xiong Qingxiang, and arched with a smile, "Thank you for your mercy." Xiangqing and Xianghuang have not recovered from the shock, and at the same time whispered, "Why, can you master the ancestral art in an invincible and supreme state?" Jian Wushuang did not have any concealment, saying, "That's because God of the Earth gave me all his life's insights before he left." So it is, so it is. The two groaned for a long time before finally getting ready to leave. The two old predecessors stayed, Jian Wushuang stopped them. "The divine power universe needs you. I urge you to stay and defend the enemy together." Xiong Qingxiang looked at each other, and then smiled. "It is natural. Even if you drive the old man away, the old man will definitely not leave the extraterritorial battlefield. This is our destiny." Looking at the two figures who fled away, Jian Wushuang not without emotion. The battlefield outside the world is dead, but the eyes of every monk are scorching, and the master of the Palace of Life, who can shake two semi-ancestor-level strong men in an invincible state, hits each monk invisibly. Agent Strong Heart Needle. It turns out that the divine universe really has hope. My God, boss, you are too great. The Overlord flew directly from a distance, and he Zhenshuang came to bear hug fiercely. Jian Wushuang smiled, "Sooner or later you can do it." The following patriarch ancestor White Ape directly pulled the Overlord from Jian Wushuang, without good airs. "You kid, you will always be so rude. Isn't it that I can't help seeing the boss?" The Overlord smirked. The White Ape was sighing with emotion. It has only been tens of thousands of years without seeing him, and the Lord of Wushuang Palace has grown up to this day. It is really a blessing for the divine universe. Jian Wushuangdao, the white ape is superb, the war is coming, and Jianmo can only do his best to improve himself. The white ape nodded, then glanced left and right, and whispered, "How do you have a chance of winning against the Afossad?" Jian Wushuang stunned, and then smiled bitterly, "No one in Chengdu, and now I can only guarantee that I can retreat from his hands." The white ape apparently responded too, and patted his head awkwardly, "Look at my head, it's almost getting old." Jian Wushuang knew the anxieties of the ancestors of the white apes, and then groaned and then said, "The white ape is supreme, and rest assured that when the of emptiness comes, someone will deal with it." The white ape nodded supremely and stopped questioning. He never doubted Jian Wushuang's words. After half a day of embarrassment with everyone, Jian Wushuang entered the base camp. At this moment, more than 1,500 years have passed since he sat under the wordless monument, and the premonition that the catastrophe is imminent is getting stronger and stronger. Listening to the constant news from the garrison in the cracks, Jian's eyes sink like water. Just as he was going to take a trip to the cracks, the urgent training from the first echelon rang through the giant hall. Listening to that sharp training, everyone's mood fell to the bottom of the valley instantly. This kind of urgent training is the highest level, indicating that the virtual universe has already invaded. Is this day finally here? Pressing the agitation in the heart, Jian Wushuang slowly walked out of the hall. Everyone was dignified, and the monks in dozens of cities gathered silently in front of the base camp, like a bit of spark gathering. Nearly 5 million monks looked like a sculpture, none of them flinched, staring into the dark abyss. Jian Wushuang finally looked back at the countless monks who were crushing the sky, and added the voice of divine power, resounding completely in the sky of the sky. "All glory we do today." A short sentence completely ignited the hearts of all monks. Everything that is in mind is vain. The variety of strong divine powers soared into the sky. A total of 5 million monks condensed the fortunes of various star domains, and at this moment exudes the most magnificent divine power. The void in the whole extraterrestrial battlefield is trembling. This time, the Battle of the Holocaust may be the last one. Chapter 46-35. Divine power poured freely into the void. Headed by Jian Wushuang, the 5 million strong monks gathered in the cracks and made their best in one battle. Stepping on the outermost side of the extraterrestrial battlefield, an equally majestic force is permeating. There are 10 columns in total. At the moment, nearly 8 branches have fallen, and more than 10 ordinary supremes are fleeing desperately. Behind them, nearly 100 vanities who act as scout pioneers are struggling to kill. The sword has no double-sided color and is cold. Suddenly, the void rose, and a huge palm print killed the hundreds of traces of vanity directly. All monks were shocked. They shot hundreds of vanity in one palm. "I'm afraid the semi-ancestors couldn't do it." Emperor Taishu and Emperor Jinwu all looked at the figure under the black robe with a complex look. In just tens of thousands of years, he has grown to the existence that he needs to look up to. When the virtual forces dissipated as much as possible, the more than 10 supremes hurriedly ran to the front of Jian Wushuang. One of the older elders panicked and said, "Wushuang Palace Lord, the big thing is bad, the void crack has cracked, and they have already attacked from the crack." Jian Wushuang heard his words frown, and then rushed forward, with more than 5 million monks behind him. Void fissures are located at the junction of the divine universe and the unreal universe. In that mysterious zone, both the divine and virtual powers are weak. When the forces of the divine universe rushed to the junction, all the monks could not help but take a breath. I saw that at the junction of the crack and enchantment, a celestial abyss had been cracked smoothly to both sides, just like the heavenly gate of heaven, and countless vain forces escaped. The black army of vain soldiers, like the dark fog covering the sky, emerged from the cracks of the door that day. Those old friends also appeared. Surging in a black mist, the 8 desolate lords led more than 200,000 scouts, and looked away from each other with the sword unparalleled. 200,000 scouts, there are nearly 50,000 traces of vanity. Their role is to act as a sharp knife, fiercely into the heart of the divine universe. The two half-ancestors who were almost killed by Jian Wushuang with their own power in the past were now crushed by the dark army of virtual soldiers. Meet the blood feud, the 8 desolate emperor and that 2-in-1 deceit, almost anxious to directly kill the sword without twining to pieces. However, these are not over yet. The endless stream of virtual men is boundless, as if connected to the sky, stepping out of the virtual universe. The immense pressure was on every monk's heart, but no one took a half-step back, silent and dead. On the top of the army of virtual soldiers, the virtual transformed from hundreds of millions of virtual forces seemed like a demon to come into the world, and the star-like red eyes penetrated 9 days and 10 places and looked at Jian Wushuang. And on the side of the virtual god, a shocking virtual shadow also condensed. With the black mist surging down, a majestic treasurer wearing a black gold suit and crown on his head appeared. Jian Wushuang's eyes synced fiercely, and that was just a glance in the starfish realm to scare the eternal emperor, and now it is also here. The two ancestors straddled the world, and their appearance almost made all monks despair. Next, the one with 6 arms of rules swarming behind him, with 6 members of the swarming organization coming at the same time. 3 ancestors. The supreme existence of the supreme, 3 in the camp of the virtual universe appeared 3. The heavens and earth changed, and even when it first came, it shattered the void. There is no place to hold 3 ancestors. At this moment, even Jian Wushuang's heart felt a sense of weakness. The ancestor is the existence that truly surpasses the rules, and even the semi-ancestors can hardly cause any harm to it. The 3 ancestors are really terrible. Is it innocent to die, my magical universe? At this moment, all the monks were already frustrated. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang took the lead to release the vast divine power, and the unmatched divine power swayed up with the divine pattern, but it was the faint barrier of the invading virtual force. At the same time, the Foam tribe Fengqi, the dragon tribe Linhe, the dragon emperor, the blood wave is supreme, the phase is light and the phase is deserted. At this moment, a total of 7 half-ancestors release the divine treasure. The emptiness is magnificent, and the divine power belonging to the divine universe has blossomed a tough side at this moment. Along with the surging divine power, Lao Zun took a step forward, and a black water treasure that shook the sky transformed from behind him. A strange but majestic energy dissipates the imaginary force that has dissipated almost instantly. All monks looked at this scene in shock, and then their hot but fierce eyes rose again. It turns out that our divine power universe also has ancestors. The ancestral ancestor White Ape's eyes were reddish, and at the same time, the divine power that belonged to the invincible supreme peak rose. Emperor Tixus' normal and angry face also slightly raised the corners of his mouth. After seeing the statue of the elder respect, Yarrow Yarrow stared at the scarlet eyes, and everything that he had experienced in the polar starfish rushed into his heart again. Did he get abandoned from there too? There is no answer. The opponent in the bite heart is not Lao Zun. As early as when he set foot on this extraterrestrial battlefield, he locked Jian Wushuang. The terrible growth of this monster finally made it feel unusual for devouring even the devouring organization. However, today's battle, Jian Wushuang must die. That day, he escaped from the hands of Lao Zun, and the virtual was able to recover. His inner fear caused him to confront Lao Zun in the first time. And the mysterious, the emperor who has been manipulating behind the scenes so far, looks a little weird in the eyes of Lao Zun. For a time, the cold and damaged regional diplomatic circles gathered the full power of the 2 sides of the universe. This will be the most expansive Bloomberg battle since Chaos. Whether it is the defeating party or the defeating party, it will certainly pay a terrible price. Here, if I return, I will let you go all the way, otherwise it will inevitably die here. Hong Zhongdalu's voice resounded from the mouth of Shushan. He was high above him, carrying an endless evil spirit in his magnificence. But no one in the divine universe responded, everyone had a dead heart in their eyes, and scoffed at the words of the virtual god. Will the skin be attached without hair? Survival of the cold, when the magical universe is completely occupied, and anyone will just be a plaything tortured at will. Sword Wushuang laughed loudly, showing disdain in a pair of pure golden eyes, below tier, tirelessly, and invariably occupy my divine power universe for trillions of years. Everyone knows the ugly heart. Now it is before the two armies' persuasion is indeed despicable. The sword has no double character like a knife, cut to the entire virtual universe. The false sank and waved his hand to lower the punishment. Chapter 46-36. The void collapsed, and the blow with great terror power went straight to the sword without a cover. Jian Wushuang did not dodge, but directly held up the sky with one hand to meet the horrific blow of the virtual god. The red-gold divine power collided with the dark imaginary force, and everyone just felt that the void under their feet was trembling, and they all stared forward. The imaginary result did not appear. Jian Wushuang has been as stable as Dinghaitian needle, and he was destroyed by him directly. All the monks were boiling, and Feng Qi's ancestors were even more surprised. The sword, unparalleled sword that could barely resist the false gods before, was even more scary now. And his growth eventually made the three ancestors strong guards. I can't stay here. The army of sprawling vain forces has been assembled, and the tragic song is about to ring in the remote battlefield. With the Taro Excalibur raised high by the sword without hands, the monks behind him took the lead in launching the attack. The endless divine power turned into an arrow that is difficult to turn back, and nailed it into the army of Shusha's army. This is the battle of the most extreme divine power and ineffective power. A total of 7.5 ancestors released their realms in the first place. Feng Qi turned into a giant phoenix covering the sky, with a clear voice, carrying thousands of children of the phoenix family, resolutely charged. The most fierce nirvana of the world between heaven and earth, spread among the army of virtual soldiers. Anyone who is contaminated by flames, even the six-marked virtual lord, is destroyed in it. The Linhe Dragon Emperor re-illusioned the Dragon of the Destiny, and each time his body flipped, it was enough to tear the sky and destroy Wan realm. As if the claws of the giant pillars descended, hundreds of traces of vanity turned into blood mist. Bloodwave Supreme vibrated his arms, countless blood shadows quietly covered the void as in the quagmire field, and any vanity in this blood shadow field was unknowingly weakened. Heavenly Supreme, Great Axe Supreme, Patriarch White Ape, Emperor Taishu, Emperor Jinwu, a top powerful man with a million chaotic era, led the monk army and developed along the semi-ancestor level blood avenue, resolutely rushed into the army of Shusha. This was the most terrible death battle. There was no second way except for one party's death. Jian Wushuang is in the forefront of the monk army, and he is full of sacred lines, and his huge treasure protects the monks below him. The invisible sword emerged from his right palm. Wushuang Kendo, Xinghe Lake, Hei sword rises to the sky. The vast stars and the galactic galaxy are all blooming in this star-shaped sword at this moment. This sword is broken from ancient times to modern times, which brings him too much wantonness and misery. This sword is awe-inspiring. It is his sword Wushuang's own Kendo. The ancestor must also lower my eyebrows when I see. The indescribable Kendo is swept across the void, pointed to by the sword front. Hundreds of miles are my territory. This style directly turned 100,000 virtual men into fly ash. Cut out a road soaked with blood and covered with corpses. Originally, he was going to block Jian Wushuang's bite one, but he hasn't acted yet. The black water treasure is floating in front of the three ancestors. Come together. Laro Zun looked at them indifferently, concisely. Shushan suddenly sank, look for death. At the end of the story, supreme ancestor strength rose to the sky, and countless secretive runes emerged from the body of the Xian Shun. At the same time, 2 chains of engraved streamer runes were smashed from the back of the virtual god, carrying the power of the broken void to the old respect. At the same time, Yang Yi also moved, and the 6 regular arms behind him turned into virtual light, pressing down towards Laro Zun. The crown above his head was calm until the terrible Bite Emperor, and he also shot at the same time. A black beam that was almost to the extreme suddenly shot out of the sleeve of his black gold suit. 3 ancestral offensives overwhelmed Laro Zun. Under the attack, the nether sky dome was broken, and the ripples of destruction caused the starry void to collapse. Facing this killing offensive, Laro Zun's gaze turned from the previous indifference to the dignified. The Blackwater scepter turned into a ripple barrier, blocking directly in front of him. The 3 devastating offensives disappeared like mud cows into the sea. Laro Zun raised his hand to remove the barrier, and a pair of completely black pupils directly locked Bit 1. Persimmons must be softly pinched, and people must be weak. Due to the constraints of the Avenue rules, Laro Zun must break through the blockade and containment as soon as possible under the limits of his own endurance. The one that has just been promoted to the ancestor is the best choice. Eyed by Laro Zun, the past came to my heart again, and even the arm of the rule that grew back behind was faintly hurt. I swallowed a bit of jealousy in the bottom of my eyes, but more crazy. Even if I am not alone against you, but now 3 people overwhelm you, can you still have a way to live? After taking a look at the Emperor, the 3 ancestors directly fought with Laro Zun. The supreme ancestral power caused a vision of heaven and earth. A rare tide of energy swept the entire battlefield. There were weak monks and virtual men who died when their hearts broke. The 3 ancestors of the virtual universe were entangled by the old one, and the battlefield of the half-ancestors completely tilted towards the divine universe. Holding the Taro Excalibur on the left and the swordless pair of invisible longswords on the right, the damage caused is unimaginable. Only Jian Wushuang directly destroyed the army of vanguards who acted as pioneer scouts. A total of 200,000 vanguards and 50,000 vanities, none survived. Looking at the figure that turned the tide, like the patron saint of divine power, the hearts of all monks were fiery. The belief, we can win as long as the sword is unparalleled, begins to be firm in the hearts of every monk. The giant phoenix covering the sky circled on his side, and the 5-claw dragon emperor walked side by side with him. At this moment, the sword was blocked in front of all monks, like the true guardian deity. Until the emergence of Bahuang Shuzuan, barely blocked the pace of Jian Wushuang. He has taken that step completely, and there is a faint breakthrough to the top of the barren emptiness, even with his 2 members of the Bite organization, at the same time besieging sword unparalleled. Jian Wushuang, all the shame you imposed on this seat today, this seat will be returned 10 times. The low and dark voice resounded from the mouth of 8 desolation. The strong breath of the semi-ancestors peaked almost instantly. Jian Wushuang sneered, and the Taro sword in his hand pointed directly at Bahuang. This time, what I want is not just your arm, but a complete head. Sword unparalleled. It. The 8 desolate angers, the humiliation of the past, and the new revenge directly led him to rush to the sword unparalleled. Standing in place, Jian Wushuang raised his lips slightly, and the blood wave supreme had released the bleeding shadow field behind him. You have a head on this item. Let's find out today. In the chaotic void, the blood shadow field violently trembled, and countless hands suddenly hooked, firmly holding the 8 desolate emperor. Chapter 46-37. The rushing 8 desolation emperor was directly caught in it, and the fierceness on his face had not even had time to retreat. A sharp edge, a sudden shock. Bahuang Shuzuan only felt that his neck was cold, and his eyes suddenly darkened. Just picking up the invisible sword on the right hand, the sharp and hardly noticeable sword intention swept out, and directly cut off the neck of Bahuang Shuzuan. The head fell so good that the sword Wushuang reached out and shook his hands away, which directly destroyed the head of Bahuang's Wozun. And his headless corpse was devoured by the blood of the supreme blood shadow realm, and the gods were destroyed. All that happened was, in an instant, when the 2 members of the phagocytosis group reacted, the 8 desolate respects had perished. It's too fast. Just a blow that can't be seen clearly killed a semi-ancestor peak. This monster with only invincible supremacy, how can it be done? Both members of the phagocytosis group looked at Xiong Jian Wushuang in shock at the same time. Since you don't want to leave, leave them all. The indifferent voice sounded like a life-saving note, resounding from Jian Wushuang's mouth. Returning from the shock, the 2 members of the phagocytosis looked at each other and shot 6 cards directly at the sword Wushuo. Cards with a special metallic luster seem to have a strange magic power, and the space where they pass is swallowed and smoothed. Jian's eyes were frozen, and the pattern burst directly around his body, shattering the flying card. However, 2 cards escaped the explosion and covered the monk army. Nearly 20 invincible supremes and more than 500 top extremes, because they did not dodge, were instantly sealed in the card. After waiting for Jian Wushuang to block his hand, the two cards that directly sealed nearly 1,000 Supreme Masters automatically shattered, leaving no chance for rescue. That weird way of killing is really terrible. Even if the invincible Supreme is a little careless, it will be sealed. Jian Wushuang was furious and angered, and directly used the ancestral power world gate, which was about to wipe out the swallowing organization. The magnificent sky gate emerges, and the giant sky finger comes. How can the two members of the ancestral organization, both of whom are semi-ancestors, not feel the ancestral breath of them, and even prepare to escape? But soon they discovered that under the cover of that type of ancestral art, all retreats around them were blocked by the invisible enchantment. The great terror between life and death poured out from the bottom of his heart. No, you can't kill us, we will be even worse when we die. By then, Lord Devourer will make your magical universe pay your life. Jian Wushuang heard the words, his face did not fluctuate at all, the one-sided giant finger still covered. The two members of the phagocytosis did not even send out a scream, and they both burst into a mist of blood. The slaying of the three ancestors in succession has temporarily relieved some pressure. However, the war between monks and virtual men is still not optimistic. The Shusha are just an accompanying false explosion, which has opened up the realm. Ordinary Supreme is almost a deadly situation against the previous one, which is equivalent to the Supreme explosion in order to exert its power, which almost directly affects the battle situation. The 2-for-1 and 1-for-1 situation make the divine universe look good, but the situation is not optimistic. Up to now, the casualties of monks in the divine universe have broken through millions. The army of the virtual universe, with the semi-ancestors such as Jian Wushuang, Fengqi, Lin Herlongdi and other ancestors, has been swept away by siege, and the casualties are still far greater than the magical universe. Just Lao Zun alone is the three ancestors who dragged the virtual universe into a blunder, which is very important to the divine universe. If there is no old respect, even if there are dozens of ancestors in the divine universe, it will be almost impossible to escape. Jian Wushuang looked up at the back of Lao Zun gratefully, then completely let go of his hands and feet, killing the living force of the virtual universe. Above the void sky, the defeated terrorists showed the most primitive state, and the raging floated. There, even semi-ancestors dare to get involved easily. Just the aftermath revealed by the four ancestors is enough to hang any semi-ancestors. The three ancestors encircled. Looking at this guy who couldn't tell whether he was young or old, he was completely shocked. The ancestral offensive that was usually enough to destroy everything, when it struck the Lao Zun, could hardly cause any harm. He seemed to be beyond the bounds of all rules, thus causing them to reduce their dimensionality. The arm of the rule behind Yang Yi has already been cut off 3. If it were not for the Emperor's care, Lao Zun could kill him almost every time he shot. What kind of existence is he in order to survive in the hands of the Emperor Devourer, who is equally powerful beyond his imagination? Is he, like the Emperor, also a master of the rules? The more I thought about it, the more I was shocked. With a little loss of mind, Lao Zun reached out and punched out a black light, which destroyed the big hole in the belly of Ai, seeing that the Emperor, who had been walking around, raised his hand and sent him away from the circle. The situation around the 3-in-1 was instantly turned into the 2-in-1, and it had almost been defeated against the hypothesis of Lao Zun's most offensive. Emperor. Shu Shen called out the name of Emperor Shen in a deep voice, suppressing dissatisfaction in her tone. The Emperor Eater didn't say much, and a huge chess game with a handful of palms in his hands appeared above the three men's heads. The strange energy transmitted in that game, even the old Supreme could not help but delay the offensive slightly. In the densely packed chess game, stars began to flow day by day, which seemed to have spawned countless celestial kingdoms. And in each side of the astral fuckingdom, there are countless energy surges, and the divine punishment that has turned the world into a lament. At the moment when the top chess game reduced the divine punishment, even if the top was like a false god, it barely emerged from it. The extermination fell off with punishment and bombardment, and burst completely with the old statue as the center. At this moment, the entire extraterrestrial battlefield has collapsed as a result, The darkest gale in the universe whistling out of the broken void. These terrible gale winds are for monks in the ultimate dominating realm, and starry sky in terms of soldiers, it is the deadliest. Wherever feng shui passed, ordinary monks and star-studded monks disappeared instantly and could not even make a sound. Jian Wushuang had anticipated that when he shouted loudly, "Defend!" all the monks in the extraterrestrial battlefields, no doubt there is him, directly converted the divine power into a guardian and fit together. Countless divine barriers rose up, a rare truce across the battlefield, and a weird death. Kill. Nearly 54 marked virtual princes violently rise, ready to surprise, and were killed by sword Wushuang in one palm. His blood-filled eyes carried his mighty power, slowly sweeping through the restless army of virtual soldiers, and the vain priests being glanced back almost subconsciously. Chapter 46-38. At this moment, both monks and vain men reluctantly resisted in that terrible dark howling wind. Looking at the emperor from the side, a complex of meaning that was difficult to understand emerged under the eyes of Shushan, and then it was depressed. The horrific punishment from the star chess game poured out on Lao Zun. These barriers, which were transformed from the black water, could no longer block the infinite power, and all the light and darkness in sight were swallowed up. Jian Wushuang trembled in his heart, directly urging his figure to prepare to support the old respect. Feng Qi grabbed it and said hurriedly, "You are dead, you can't change any results if you go there." Jian Wushuang knew the meaning of Feng Qi's words well, but his and his companions' deaths these days have gone far beyond ordinary feelings, even if they are prepared to give them whatever they want. Click dash the crisp crackling sound suddenly resounded from the very center of the divine punishment, and then a huge arm like Xinghe broke the sky divine punishment and slammed into the emperor and the ethereal. The two eyes fixed, and each raised their hands to resist. Under the bombardment of this huge arm like Xinghe, even the ancestors retreated 1,000,000 miles away. The dark void was broken so that it could no longer be broken, and the escaped dark matter filled every inch of space. While far away, the injured Yanzi recovered, and hurried to rush to the emperor. That blow slowly retracted the arms of the two giant ancestors who had retreated from the ancestors, and at the same time, held the big palm away and shattered the star-falling chessboard directly. Lao Zun's figure was proud and independent, and the majestic black water treasure behind him slowly opened his eyes. The eyes are like two long rivers of black water that run through the ages. The vast and barren atmosphere makes everyone feel their own smallness, just like a drop in Taizong. At this moment, even the mysterious and calmly eaten emperor cannot calm down. The virtual was terrified and immediately released his ancestor. I saw a demon who awakened from the unknown wilderness, sitting in the dark, and his eyes were as big as a star field. At the same time, on the body of this demon, 6 ancient chains engraved with scarlet runes were bound, and they were extremely embarrassing. This demon who seems to be bound by the rules of heaven is the ancestor of the virtual god. The extreme evil black flame came out of the devil's mouth full of fangs, and slammed into the Blackwater River. At the same time, the Emperor Eater also shot, and a black gold crown was thrown from his sleeve by him and smashed straight. Biting his teeth, Yang Yi also rose, and the only 3 regular arms behind him turned into spears. The combined strike of the 3 ancestors, this extraterritorial battlefield was originally the weakest and most chaotic place in the universe, and could not bear it at all. The space outside the battlefield began to shatter toward the cave. 3 ancestral offensives, with supreme power, finally prevented Lao Zun's endless blow. The shock wave turned into ripples, shaking for 9 days and 10 places. He took a few steps back, opened his mouth and spit out a blood of God, and the arms of the rules behind him were all broken. The ancestors of the deities behind the virtual gods also cracked. The Emperor Eater raised his hand to take back the black gold crown, his face was finally dignified. Obviously, the power of Lao Zun is beyond their expectations. For a time, the 3 ancestors dare not act rashly. Lao Zun, as before, seems to have not been damaged from beginning to end. The sword Wushuang lowered his mouth slightly, and the Taro sword in his hand held up, "Battle." The glorious divine power emerged from the sky, and the sword unparalleled was transformed into kendo, and the battlefield was vertical and horizontal. The army of more than 3 million monks rushed to the army of Shu Shu again. If it weren't for an extraterrestrial battlefield, I'm afraid no starfield could support such a terrible war. In the previous battle, the two ancestors who were almost killed by Jian Wushuang now faced Jian Wushuang with full of hatred. The Tai Luo divine sword was cut out, but Jian Mang was absorbed strangely. At the same time, the two-in-one strange half-ancestor shook his arms in the air, and an invisible enclave directly covered the sword Wushuang in it. This time, I want your life. He was completely insane, his mouth screaming constantly. The sword Wushuang was not afraid, and the Tai Luo divine sword released the scorching Shen Mang. Courageous enough, you can take it. With the interweaving of divine power and imaginary power, a broken corpse paves in the void. Above the broken sky, the weakest one in the ancestral ranks has already been completed in this terrible confrontation. The wound that was about to heal in his abdomen was faintly torn. Shu Shen felt that the ancestor of the devil behind him had broken to a certain extent, and finally stopped. You don't belong to the divine universe, Shu Shen said, looking at the old statue standing in front of him. Lao Zun whispered, so what? Taking a deep breath, the virtual said again, since you do not belong to the magical universe, then join my virtual universe. I can agree to you first if you want. Really? Lao Zun leaned forward slightly and opened his eyes. Everything can be promised. Shu Shen nodded, all conditions. So, I think you're all dead. Lao Zun opened his eyes suddenly, and the indescribable energy spewed out of his palm, turned into thousands of black and black exercises, bound away. You're looking for death. The false anger drank, and the ancestral demon ancestor behind him suddenly broke the chain bound to his left arm and smashed directly into the old respect. Emperor and Emperor looked at each other, and together urged the figure to face the old statue. The giant arm of the demon ancestor smashed nearly 100 dark horses, and at the same time pressed the old with the virtual god. However, the transfiguration of the dark and black horses was like a living creature, which was smashed and emerged continuously. The ancestral deities of Tongtian demon roared, but fell into siege within a short period of time. Lao Zun waved his arms, little by little trapping the false gods. He felt that a strange amount of energy was quickly eating away at his own power, can't help but be frightened. As he was about to explode the ancestors of the demon god, the virtual suddenly felt a chill behind him, and he looked back subconsciously. I saw that Yi Yi had already leaped high, and issued the most terrifying force in his hand. He did not go towards the old respect, but turned towards his back. The quake in Zuxin's heart suddenly reappeared, the cold and majestic expression. He did his best, and the giant demon ancestor behind him finally broke free of thousands of black horses, and then Tongshan's arm directly grasped the smashing shot. He was about to make a deadly blow to Shu Zun, but he was controlled by Shu Zun's demon ancestor. He didn't respond at all, and was thrown to Lao Zun directly. Do not holding one's neck with one hand, Lao Zun smiled slightly. His black pupils seemed to have an irresistible power and began to eat away at one's mind. Chapter 4639, Bloody Battle. The void collapsed and the terrifying blow went straight to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang did not dodge. Instead, he faced the terrifying attack of Void God with one hand. The golden-red divine power and the dark-black void power collided. Everyone felt the space under their feet shake as they all looked forward. The result that they had imagined did not happen. Jian Wushuang was as stable as a stabilizing divine needle, and the monstrous void power was destroyed by him directly. All the cultivators were in an uproar. Feng Qi and the other ancestors were even more shocked. In the past, Jian Wushuang could only barely resist Void God's attack. Now, he was even more terrifying. His growth made the three ancestor realm powerhouses wary. This child cannot be left alive. The army that was filled with void energy had finished gathering, and a sad song was about to be heard in the off-world battlefield. As Jian Wushuang raised the Tarot divine sword high, the cultivators behind him took the lead to attack. The endless divine power turned into an arrow that could not be turned back and ruthlessly nailed into the camp of the army of void warriors. This was a bloody battle between the peak of divine power and void power. A total of 7 ancestors released their respective domains immediately. Feng Qi turned into a giant phoenix that covered the sky. She let out a clear cry and led the tens of thousands of phoenix clansmen to charge forward. The fiercest and most soul-devouring nirvana fire domain in the world spread out in the army of void warriors. Anyone who was infected by the flames, even a 6-scar void master, would be destroyed. Dragon Emperor Linhe conjured his natal dragon once again. Every time his body flipped, it was enough to tear the sky apart and destroy the world. The dragon claw, which was like a giant pillar supporting the sky, descended, turning hundreds of scar-level void masters into clouds of blood mist. Supreme Shui Bo raised his arm and advanced. Countless blood shadows filled the void like a swamp, and any void master who entered this blood shadow domain would be weakened without them knowing it. Supreme Tianyi, Supreme Jun Fu, White Ape Overlord Patrech, Great Void Divine Emperor, and Golden Crow Emperor, all of them were supreme experts who had dominated the world for millions of chaos cycles. They led their armies and followed the path of blood that had been opened up by ancestors, resolutely charging into the army of void warriors. This was the most brutal battle to the death. There was no other way except for the death of one side. Jian Wushuang was at the forefront of the army of cultivators. His body was surging with brilliant divine patterns, and his huge treasure image was protecting the cultivators below him. An invisible sword appeared in his right palm. Wushuang's sword Dao, Star River Lake Sea sword intent rose from the sky. The vast stars and the Star River bloomed in the star-style sword intent. This sword strike had broken the past and the present, and it had gathered too much of his willfulness and dejection. It was an extremely proud move, and it was Jian Wushuang's sword Dao. Even ancestor realm experts have to lower their heads when they see it. The indescribable swordsmanship suppressed the void. Wherever the sword pointed, hundreds of millions of miles was his territory. This move turned 100,000 void warriors into ashes. A path that was soaked in blood and covered with corpses was cut out. Devour One, who wanted to stop Jian Wushuang, did not move. The black water phantom floated in front of the 3 ancestor realm experts. Attack me together then. Old Master looked at them indifferently, his words concise. Void God's face darkened. You're looking for death. With that, extreme ancestor realm power surged, and countless mysterious and dark runes emerged from Void God's body. At the same time, 2 chains engraved with flowing light runes smashed out from Void God's back and smashed toward Old Master with the power to shatter the void. At the same time, Devour One also moved. The 6 arms of laws of various colors behind him transformed into illusionary light and pressed down on Old Master. Devouring Emperor, who was wearing his crown and had been calm all this time, made his move at the same time. A black beam of light suddenly shot out from his black and gold robe. 3 ancestor realm attacks suppressed Old Master at the same time. The void was shattered by this attack, and the ripples of destruction caused the void of the starfield to collapse. In the face of this destructive attack, Old Master's eyes turned from indifferent to serious. The black scepter in his hand transformed into a rippling barrier, which he used to block the attack. The 3 destructive attacks were like clay oxen entering the sea, completely dissipating. Old Master lifted his hand to remove the barrier, and his pitch-black eyes locked on Devour One. Persimmons should be picked and pinched, and people should be picked and beaten. Due to the restraints of the rules of the Great Tao, Old Master had to break through the blockade as soon as possible under the limits of his body. Devour One, who had just reached Ancestor Realm, was the best choice. Seeing Old Master's intense stare, the past came back to his mind again, and even the newly grown arm of laws behind him started to ache. A trace of fear flickered in the depths of Devour One's eyes, but it was more of madness. Even if I can't defeat you by myself, there are 3 of us now. Do you think you can still survive? After exchanging a glance with Devouring Emperor, the 3 of them engaged in close combat with Old Master. The ancestor-level aura caused a phenomenon in the heavens and earth. A rare energy tide swept across the entire battlefield. Some cultivators and void warriors with slightly weaker cultivation realms died immediately with their hearts shattered. The 3 ancestor realm powerhouses of the void universe were entangled by Old Master, and the battle of the ancestor-level powerhouses was completely tilted toward the divine power universe. With the Tarot Divine Sword in his left hand and the invisible long sword in his right hand, Jian Wushuang's destructive power was beyond imagination. Jian Wushuang alone had annihilated the army of Void Warriors who had served as the vanguard scouts. There were 200,000 Void Warriors and 50,000 Void Masters, but none of them survived. Looking at the figure who had turned the tide like the guardian of the universe, all the cultivators' hearts were burning. As long as Jian Wushuang is alive, we will win. This belief began to strengthen in the hearts of every cultivator. The sky-covering giant phoenix circled around him and the five-clawed dragon emperor walked side by side with him. At this moment, Jian Wushuang stood in front of all the cultivators like a real guardian god. It was not until the appearance of the Ba Huang that Jian Wushuang was barely stopped. Void Master Ba Huang, who had taken the last step and was on the verge of breaking through to the peak, surrounded Jian Wushuang with the two members of Devourers. Jian Wushuang, all the humiliation you've imposed on me, I will return it 10 times today. A deep and sinister voice came out of the mouth of the Void Master Ba Huang. The powerful aura of a half-ancestor surged almost instantly. Jian Wushuang sneered and pointed the Tarot Divine Sword at the Ba Huang. This time, I'm not only going to take your arm, but your whole head. Jian Wushuang, you deserve to die. Void Master Ba Huang was furious. The humiliation of the past and the new hatred made him charge at Jian Wushuang without any hesitation. Jian Wushuang, who was standing still, smirked. Behind him, Supreme Shui Bo had already released the Blood Shadow Domain. I'll end your life today. In the chaotic void, the Blood Shadow Domain shook violently and countless bloody hands grabbed Void Master Ba Huang. Chapter 4640. The sorrow of the world and the terrible detonation directly destroyed the extraterrestrial battlefield, and everything was destroyed in the fragmentation. The entire emptiness of the sky was swallowed up by the polar daylight produced by that explosion. Even the Emperor Eater was a subconscious cover. This indescribable polar day lasted for nearly half a cup of tea. Waiting for the dazzling polar day to dissipate, the Emperor Eater hurriedly glanced up at the center of the explosion, but apart from nothingness, there was only a little bit of wreckage and broken arm. Where are the two of them? Asked the Emperor Shunsheng, and the endless majesty pressed against the of emptiness. Shu Shen showed no weakness, and he was in a state of extreme power. Do you think that you can't kill him by me alone? Forbearing in his heart cut off the fierce rage of the virtual god, the Emperor urged his body to eagerly investigate in the explosive center. Impossible, did he really die? The Emperor was horrified, but the blow from Shu Shen was too horrible, and Lao Zun was seriously injured by his attack, and it was difficult to survive that blow. Thinking of this, the Emperor suppressed the anger and suspicion in his heart. He did not look at the virtual god, and cast his eyes downward. There is an army of nearly 3 million magical universes. I don't care if he dies or not, it's right now, you ants. The Emperor is like a real decision-maker, and directly issues orders over the Fossard, slapping as many as possible, leaving no one. The Shu Sha army hesitated for a moment, and then, led by several members of the ancestral organization, rushed to the army of madness. Taking a deep breath, Shen Shushan said, Emperor, you have crossed the border. The Emperor heard the words and sneered, it's just a cosmic order, so you take it to heart. Don't you forget that your own promise was the original. There was a hint of hatred in the bottom of the eyes, and the virtual never spoke again, manipulating the ancestor of the demon behind, and smashing the power of the divine power. Jian Wushuang and the only ancestor of the divine power universe fell. All the monks of the divine power universe looked at that scene. Without the sword Wushuang who entered the kendo with one's body, and the army of soldiers with a virtual army like a no man's land, all the monks almost lost their benchmarks and hopes almost instantly. The horrific blow of the demon ancestors directly wiped out more than 200,000 monks, and the supreme divine realm died out countless. The Jinwu tribe, Taishu Temple, all the disciples of Jude Pavilion who came to help, all died. None survive. When the purple hair was supreme and the red ear supreme was about to die, he looked away at the place where Jianwu twinned. With a smile in his eyes, He quietly went to death after a quiet cherishment. The foundation of the Star Sword sect was destroyed, leaving only Wu Zhenxian and a few others to barely escape the disaster. The 3 phoenixes and unicorns were also seriously injured. After the Emperor Eater also joined the battlefield of the slaughter, the forces of the divine universe have already suffered the devastation. Even the semi-ancestors have no resistance at this moment. Cold and frosty, his face looked at the destruction that was approaching. The huge wings that covered the sky quietly blocked in front of the cold frost, while blocking the aftermath of the ancestor. Feng Qi uttered a terrible cry, and his phoenix was extinguished and turned into a human figure and fell down. Lung Rushuang hurriedly reached out and hugged, and Feng Qi, who fell into his arms, was already shattered with blood on his left side. Old ancestors. A total of more than 200 are the supreme ancestors of the Feng clan. An army of more than 3 million monks, only 1 million remain. The virtual universe is completely insane, and every virtual person is like a bloodthirsty demon, quickly eating away the life of the divine universe. Looking at the battle that was almost a foregone conclusion, Bloodwave Supreme seemed 10 years old at the same time. The hardest thing to say was finally spoken. Everyone who belongs to the divine universe retreats as much as possible and retains the final salary. The face of every monk is extremely pale. With this defeat, the magical universe will no longer exist, and no one can stop the pace of the virtual universe. Here, leave it to the old man to take care of him. The Bloodwave Supreme robe hunted against the wind. His face was not half frightened, only indifferent after seeing through the fortune. A broken snowflake sword was already broken. Laokia pours the last sip of wine from his wine gourd into his throat, and then enters the half-ancestor state. He was silent for a whole life, and he wandered all his life. In the last battle, he finally realized. The splendid and magnificent half-ancestor divine power emerged, and the old beggar dressed up as a martyr in barley disappeared and replaced by a young swordsman with a sword and eyebrows. The divine power universe can't be led by no one, and let you do that kind of thing. The old swordsman, a young swordsman, laughed loudly. It's time to find a place to rest after living so long. A blood-stained Linhe Dragon Emperor also took a step forward, and said quietly, "Here is the place for us. I would like to ask the blood wavelength to take good care of the magical universe." Long Yang, Long Kai held the Bloodwave Supreme. "Let's go." The supreme power dropped, the old beggar laughed loudly, and a turbulent blue-shirt swordsman transformed himself into a sword, like a long river, against the sky. The old beggar shouted with his own body, and finally defeated the virtual god. The sword dissipated like a star, and the divine universe also lost a semi-ancestor. Under the strike of Laokia, all the vanity that crossed the sword waterfall died out, even the semi-ancestors were evading the frontier and gaining time for the retreat of the divine force. At this moment, on the broken extraterrestrial battlefield, only the Dragon Emperor Linhe remained, standing firmly in the distance. Looking at this monk who is not yet at the peak of his ancestors, the emperor didn't want to, and reached out to kill. However, the falling slap of the sky is hard to reach half an inch in the next moment. As the emperor's eyes narrowed, a breath of great terror came from his face. A sturdy bone dragon claw suddenly grasped the emperor's palmar slap and then smashed it directly. Disillusionment started. The day-like eyes burst out with magnificent light. The Emperor Linhe looked calm, and his clear eyes gradually became cloudy. Incarnate Red Jinzilong, 1 gold, 1 bone and 2 dragons, turned into the last line of defense, and stayed here. The ancestors of the first generation of the dragon family, and the Dragon Emperor, both fell off the outer battlefield. The Emperor dies, the virtual is wounded, and the virtual universe army is erased by nearly 800,000. The boundless corpse is filled with nothingness and void, with countless blood, magic fragments gathered into a winding river. This battle of catastrophe is far from stopped, no one knows when it will end, but it will end with the complete destruction of one universe. Chapter 46-41. Among the broken robes, the jadeite jade ornaments were ringing, and a slender green lotus whose rhizomes were jasperized, slowly falling into the endless abyss with its owner. Every drop of God's blood with powerful power falls into the void, like leaves returning to the earth. Everything seems to be a strange dream, falling forever. However, in this dark matter full of unknowns, as in the darkness of dreams, a pure and extreme Jin Mang broke this chaos. Well, here, how can there be two people? A puzzled and magnificent voice sounded, and finally everything was calm again. I don't know how long, the figure that should have fallen under the hands of Shushan, but I don't know how to survive, slowly opened his eyes. Into the eyes, I just feel the surroundings are clear, and there is a gentle sound of breeze and bamboo in my ears. I dead, here, is reincarnation. Did God die? Would there be reincarnation? Sitting slowly from the bamboo bed, Jen Wushuang was too late to think about any problems, and was interrupted by the severe pain from his body. I still have pain when I die. Am I not dead? Jen Wushuang murmured softly, hurriedly holding his heart, carefully examining the meridians in his body. After this investigation, he really realized that he was not dead. Except that the meridians in the body are broken, even the divine power is slowly circulating in life and death. I didn't die. I didn't die. Unable to control the ecstasy, Jen Wushuang forgot the severe pain in his body. Only after calming down for a while, he looked at the temporary room. The room is so simple that every piece of furniture and window decoration, even the house is made of bamboo, and from a rough level, it seems that the owner made it by hand. Fighting the pain, Jen Wushuang walked out of the room barefoot. Outside the door, the warm and gentle sunlight was shining on the face, and bamboo gardens were planted on both sides of the small house. In front of him, there is a vast plain. Looking at the environment like a fairyland in front of him, Jen Wushuang completely let go of his vigilance. He hasn't known how many years, and he has never enjoyed a moment of relaxation. But he only relaxed for a moment, and all the problems came to mind again. The fierce battlefield of blood and fire, the army of 1 million magical monks, and the severely wounded Lao Zun are now like a sharp knife on his body. Taking a deep breath, Jen Wushuang looked at another room in the bamboo house behind him. He quickly pushed in the door, and he was slightly relieved. In the room, Lao Zun was lying quietly on it, his breath was gentle, and he had passed the dangerous period, but only the dark blue cobweb-like lines on his skin had not disappeared. Without any hesitation, Jen Wushuang sat in front of the bed and reached out to cross the body's power of circulation and death into Lao Zun. Divine power enters the body like a mud ox into the sea, but no trace is seen, but the sword is as if sitting still, just as it has always been to enter the divine power. So many years back and forth, the round of the sky will never rise and fall, everything is as usual. Until this continent sent out a slight wave. Opening his eyes slowly, as if aware of something, Jen Wushuang quickly walked out of the bamboo house. From the distant sky, a gap was automatically opened in space, and countless figures came to this continent. Looking at the familiar figures and the familiar divine power, Jen Wushuang couldn't restrain his heart and swept away. The body of the bloodbath is supreme, both the deities and consciousness have reached the end of the crossbow. On his side, the white shirt turned into the blood shirt of the 9 kings of calamity, the ancestor white ape, dragon pheasant, dragon pond, Wu Zhenxian II virtual emperor and others did the same. The army of monks less than a few million has long lost any glory in their eyes, but only the Kirin family, who also suffered heavy casualties, has a look of excitement on their faces. Sword unparalleled in a plain shirt, but came to everyone in an instant. Bloodwave Supreme smiled slowly, and said slowly, Wushuang Gongzhu, Bloodwave has come to see you. At the end of the speech, the Supreme Bloodwave passed out. Jen Wushuang hurriedly urged his figure to hold the bloodwave supremely. Wu Zhenxian, on the other hand, opened her eyes wide and couldn't settle the channel. Swords warriors? Are you dead? Jen Wushuang nodded with a bitter smile. Fortunately, I didn't die, let's not talk about this first, I'll find a place quickly. At this moment, all the nerves that had been strained were completely relaxed. He was not dead, and everyone firmly believed that the divine universe had a chance. Nearly 1 million magical forces of the universe are stationed directly on the plane. After all, every inch of space here is full of pure divine power. It is imperative to quickly restore itself. Until the overwhelmed monks were properly arranged, Jian Wushuang noticed that not far away, a middle-aged man in a suit of Su Jinhua was looking at him with a smile. Behind that extraordinary middle-aged man, only the two surviving members of the Kirin Five Sons, Kering and Qi, stood there. With almost intuition, Jian Wushuang realized that the middle-aged man was the master of this world. Little friend, she is extraordinary in physique, and has been fully recovered in just a few years. The middle-aged man took Qi Tinky and the two together and quickly stepped in front of Jian Wushuang. Thank you for saving your life, Jianmo is grateful. Jian Wushuang arched solemnly. The middle-aged man laughed loudly. My name is Qi Ting, the eldest son of the Kirin tribe. If you don't hate it, you can call me Brother Qi. Looking at the two men behind the middle-aged man, Qi Tinky already understood that the middle-aged man was right. Without much hesitation, Jian Wushuang smiled again. Big Brother Qi. The middle-aged man named Qi Ting nodded and smiled. For many years, my situation in Kangwutai has finally been of some use. Kangwutai, where is this? Near the broken Luoju, it lives in the eyes of Chaos Spring, explained Qi Ting. Jian Wushuang nodded. When Luoju Starfield was destroyed, he felt vaguely that there was strange energy attached to the eyes of Chaos Spring. Now he wants to come to this state of Kangwutai. I have been here since my youth. To this day, I haven't known how many epochs, and everything that has happened outside has not been known for half a minute. It has been half a lifetime. Qi Ting is half reminiscent and half emotional. If I didn't take that step completely, I'm afraid that this tribulation of the divine universe will be my eternal regret. Speaking of which, Qi Ting's eyes flashed with burning stalks, a kind of breath that emerged through the vicissitudes of ancient times. And Jian Wushuang, who just wanted to comfort Qi Ting a few words, couldn't help but feel shocked when he felt everything that appeared to him. The kind of person who is completely aloof from the outside, but has control over all things, breathes and swallows the existence of the creation of rules, it is an ancestor. Chapter 46-42. See ancestor again. The kind that almost represents the entire universe and the embodiment of the entire universe. There should be only, and there can only be two. But now, there have been 5 statues. The virtual universe has a total of virtual gods, Bite the Emperor, and 1 or 3 deities. The divine power cosmic is 1. At present, in the Kangwa platform near the eye of this chaotic spring, the Kirin tribe actually has 1. Jian Wushuang felt that his thoughts were a bit chaotic. When he first sat in Yunxiao Palace, he had heard that the of the universe talked about the luck of the universe and the extreme state. In a word, whether it is the divine universe or the void universe, only 2 ancestors can be born. Because in the vast sky, although the divine power is magnificent, but the luck is only 10% of nothingness. The most important step for children to achieve the ancestor level is to grasp the 10% that is scattered throughout the universe. The original of the sky and the ancestor of Fengtian are a good example. The god of the earth first realized that the fortune in the universe would cause Fengtian's ancestors to fail to break through the ancestor level until the moment he died. And why the poor universe can only have 1 ancestor, because no matter who it is, from the moment the ancestor is achieved, he is the master of order and guardian of the rules of the universe. Ancestors are, in a way, equivalent to the concrete representation of the universe. Unless the previous ancestor falls, there is no possibility of a second ancestor below this avenue. The top of the universe is the ancestral level. This was previously believed by Jian Wushuang, because the rules and divine power controlled by the of the universe are too vast. He can no longer imagine what kind of power can be surpassed. But after experiencing all the catastrophes, he completely changed Jian Wushuang's thinking. The appearance of Lao Zun and Emperor is obviously beyond the ancestor. Even the true ancestor of the virtual cannot cause damage to Lao Zun. They seemed to come with the mist, and everything was pushing the sword Wushuang in the hazy unknown. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang quickly accepted this reality, and at the same time he was a little happy. The Kirin tribe now has an ancestor, which is unimaginable for the role of the 2-party universe war. Looking at the sword Wushuang who just came back from his thoughts, Qi Ting laughed again. The lord of the Wushuang palace is a real astounding Tianjiao. From your roots, I have not even reached 100 years. Jian Wushuang did not conceal this, and shook his head with a smile. Big brother Qi is ridiculous. Jian has less than 900,000 years. As soon as this remark was made, both Chiting and Chichi took a breath of cold air. From the previous tragic battles, it seems that the sword unparalleled is the first person below the ancestor level, and the magical power has killed half of the ancestor level. So far everyone has a deep memory. They thought that Jian Wushuang was an old monster who had practiced countless chaos ages with Zeus, but never thought that he had only practiced for 900,000 years. What kind of genius is that to reach such a point? It is necessary to know that even if they are the most common descendants of the Kirin tribe, it takes 10 million years to sleep once. You can grow to such a degree less than 1/10 of your sleep time. Qi Ting only thinks that he has practiced the dog for so many years, and he has practiced it on dogs. After hearing the affirmation of Jian Wushuang, even Qi Ting, who has been promoted to the rank of ancestor, shook his head and smiled bitterly. It turns out that in this world, there is really no arrogance. Next, under the inquiry of Qi Ting, Jian Wushuang elaborated all the major events that have happened in the universe over the past hundreds of thousands of years before saying goodbye. He was eager to know the current status of the divine universe. Flying to the previous bamboo house, the Bloodwave Supreme who had fainted to death was awake. The White Ape, Dragon Owl, Dragon Pond, Wu Zhenxian, etc. all sat in place and recovered their injuries as soon as possible. After seeing Jian Wushuang, Bloodwave Supreme got up quickly, but was pressed on the bamboo bed by Jian Wushuang. Master of Wushuang Palace, we all thought you were dead, and seeing you again today is really God's immortal universe. Bloodwave Supreme eyes reddish. Jian Wushuang was also extremely emotional in his heart. At the same time, he was also a bit puzzled. From the perspective of his deities and power consumption at that time, he could not compete with the full blow of the virtual god. Lao Zun was also seriously injured by a sneak attack at the time, and was also unable to compete. Facing the attack of supreme terror, there is absolutely only the end of the annihilation, but Jian Wushuang at this moment prefers to be good, and even after waking up, he has never detected a dark illness in his body. After a brief thought, Jian Wushuang left it behind. Immediately afterwards, he began to inquire about what happened during the period when he and Lao Zun were dead. Everyone calmly or sadly died, the scenes of the past emerged from the past, one by one, the supreme arrogance of each era, and now they are all turned into dead bones and lying on the desolate battlefield outside the battle. The repressed swords are breathless. Get angry. Everything that shouldn't have happened, the old friend who shouldn't have died, really went away. How to end the reappearance of this scene? Jian Wushuang already has the answer in his heart. And when I heard it was the remnant of the entire divine universe that Qi Ting had taken in after the Battle of the Holocaust, Jian Wushuang also vaguely knew that when he and Lao Zun floated somewhere in the universe, they should also be led by Qi Ting. Come. After listening to all of this, Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice, when our wound is healed, it is the day to swing the sword again. Bloodwave Supreme never refuted the words of Jian Wushuang, and he nodded firmly. After another charge, Jian Wushuang walked to another bamboo house. Lung Rushuang had been waiting outside the door, her eyes closed for years, making her extremely stunned. Jian Wushuang was so distressed that he reached into her arms. Fujuan is all useless to me, so Feng Qi paid such a great price to save me. Lung Rushuang whispered in a low voice. Stupid girl, this is not to blame you, it is Fengqi's ancestors' righteousness that they will willingly give up to save you. Jian Wushuang waved the tears in her eyes and said quietly, relax, I will definitely help Fengqi Patriarch is out of danger. After handing Lung Rushuang to take care of the girl Lan Lan, Jian Wushuang quickly walked into the enchantment set by the descendants of the Phoenix clan. As soon as I set foot, the hot and blazing fire rose with the wind, and even the divine power in Jian Wushuang had a burning sensation. At this moment, only about 2,000 children and grandchildren are sitting on the ground. At the very least, they are sketched by ordinary divine powers, transforming into a huge wingspan, which together depicts a nirvana formation. At the center of these eyes, Feng Qi's thin figure was lying flat. Chapter 46-43. At a glance, Jian Wushuang realized that Feng Qi's situation is far more serious than he thought. The broken soul is like a cloud of smoke, and the unstoppable escape is no longer possible. If it is not a Feng clan belonging to one of the three ancient tribes, I am afraid that the virtual god's blow will be enough to kill Feng Qi. Perhaps he was aware of the entry of external force, and a handsome young man with a naked upper body stood up and was about to anger. When he saw that it was Jian Wushuang, the anger in his eyes turned to loneliness and sadness. What's the situation? Do I need to do anything? Jian Wushuang quickly stepped forward and asked. The handsome young man stopped talking, and finally said, I'm afraid it's hard for the ancestor to get through this time. Jian Wushuang heard the words, and his heart sank suddenly. I see it possible that you all can be reborn in nirvana. I have also seen Feng Qi show it, and soon recovered from the near-death state. Yes, our Feng family can indeed nirvana, but the ancestor of the ancestor has gone. We can't even awaken the ancestor. How can she carry out nirvana? Jun, my youth, looked sad. Even if it is the descendants of my family, you can't wake up with the same force. Looking at the spirit that could not be suppressed even in the nirvana formation, I was afraid that Feng Qi would be truly dead if he let it go on. Without thinking, Jian Wushuang directly said, Can I get into the formation? I want to give it a try. There was a moment of hesitation flashing in the eyes of the handsome young man, but before he could speak, Jian Wushuang stepped directly into the formation. There was an urgent voice behind him, Be sure to seize the time. I am afraid that the ancestor may fall at any time. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang came to the very center of the formation, watching his eyes closed like a sleeping Feng Qi, and he slowly sat in front of her. I'm coming. The fiery little flames flew away with the wind. Jian Wushuang is like talking to the heart, telling Feng Qi about the past. From the first meeting to the side-by-side battle, he is like a family treasure, portrayed exactly. I am very grateful for everything you did. You saved my life when you were in Luoju, and you saved my wife's life on the battlefield outside the territory without turning back. If I can't wake up, I'm afraid I can't get enough of it. When you wake up, I will promise you, or the 3 promises of the Feng family, no matter where I am in the future and when, these 3 promises will be valid forever. In addition, I think that in the coming years, the divine power universe will not have a woman like you, which will be too boring. The calm words accompanied by the hair-like flames escaped in this burst. And the handsome young man who was like an ant on the hot pot outside the formation, also stopped now, and fixed his eyes on the center of the formation. The spirit of Feng Qi, which had been escaping continuously, began to no longer escape outward, and at the same time those scattered spirits began to transform into the appearance of little fire phoenix and quickly withdrew into the body. Seeing this scene, Jian Wushuang was overjoyed in his heart, and directly opened his left wrist. The blood of the ultra-perfect spiritual constitution immediately fell on Feng Qi's left body. The blood of God, which contains strong and tenacious vitality, like vines, quickly repairs and nourishes Feng Qi's broken body. The skin fills up at a rate visible to the naked eye, and every meridian is repairing. And Feng Qi's pale face also became at a rate visible to the naked eye. I don't know how long after that, Feng Qi opened his eyes slowly, watching the sword blood that moisturizes the blood of her sword, and she said quietly, I heard what you just said. There were already some dizzy swordsmen, and he grinned reluctantly, It's good to hear it. If you can't hear me, just say nothing. Are you serious about what you said? Feng Qi continued to ask. Jian Wushuang nodded, naturally. A happy look appeared on Feng Qi's face, and he didn't see Jian Wushuang's increasingly pale face at all. You don't owe me anything. I save you. That's my willingness. During the bleeding for nearly half of the incense stick time, even Jian Wushuang could hardly hold it. Come on, Nirvana, I can't hold on. Feng Qi reacted, and hurriedly propped up, covering the wound between Jian's hands and wrists with his hands. You are such a nerd. Are you afraid of damaging the source by so much blood flowing from the source? Jian Wushuang shook his head slowly. Leave me alone, your business matters, don't delay. Then you are waiting for me here, don't leave anyway. Feng Qi bit her lip lightly. If you go, I won't do it. Jian Wushuang only felt dizzy and could not care about anything, so he nodded again and again. Feng Qi smiled and turned to walk behind him. In front of her, one side braved the fierce, terrifying flames to completely open. A pair of flame wings suddenly burst out behind Feng Qi, and then entered the enchanted fire. With her front foot off the ground, Jian Wushuang collapsed into the center of her eyes. Due to the order of the ancestors, the descendants of the Feng clan did not dare to step into the formation easily, and could only control the fire by scratching their ears and scratching their heads, so as to make the sword Wushuang in the eyes as comfortable as possible. Time passed by, and 2 days later, in the enchantment of the fire area that had been calm, violently swept away thousands of fire feathers. At the same time, with a huge fiery red wings, Junmai Yinghua's abnormal women swooped out of it. After Nirvana's success, Feng Qi ran directly to the drowsy sword in front of his eyes. She lifted her hand and also cut her wrist, dripping into the mouth of Jian Wushuang with the blood of her ancestral blood. The handsome young man standing on the outermost periphery saw this and hurriedly said, "Never mind the ancestor." Feng Qi was ignorant, and the blood of the ancestral blood of the Feng clan still dripped into his mouth evenly. "Absorb it, be sure to absorb more." The blood of the ancestor of the Phoenix family entered the throat, and all the meridians in Jian Wushuang's body burned at the same time. At the same time, a winged phoenix shadow appeared in the center of his chest, just like living creatures. Feng Qi, after pondering over and over again, stretched out his right hand and painted it quickly on Jian Wushuang's left arm. Immediately, a simple phoenix totem emerged, then hidden under the skin. After all this, Feng Qi smirked like a childish child, and then returned to the usual lonely cold look. After the blood of the Feng ancestors in Jian Wushuang reached saturation, Feng Qi withdrew his palm. All states are calming down, and Jian Wushuang falls into a deep sleep. Feng Qi walked out of the formation slowly and said softly, "You are here to take good care of Wushuang Palace Master and notify me as soon as you wake up." The handsome young man nodded his promise, and then continued to carefully urge the formation. Chapter 46-44. With the passing of time, Kangwa Taichung will never have day and night, and the ultimate divine power makes this the most perfect place to sit and realize. As the dojo of Kaiting's ancestors, the avenue rules contained here are far beyond any place in the divine universe. This Kangwutai is equivalent to the Yunxiao Palace at the time of the Eternal God. And in the palace of Eternal God Yunxiao, I heard that it is an unforgettable great blessing. Often, only the most shocking and brilliant genius in the universe has such a chance to hear the futon. This Kangwa Terrace, which is also an ancestor-level dojo, opened new doors and allowed these million monks to practice Taoism. In just a few months, all the monks of the divine universe have recovered from the trauma, but there are still tens of thousands of traumatized monks who died. At the same time, many monks broke through the shackles of the cloud mud and went straight into the supreme divine realm. And Jian Wushuang also woke up soon after, thinking that the original divine power that would be slightly lost, not only did not wear at all, but was accompanied by a strange surging power. Jian Wushuang didn't understand it until the descendants of the Feng clan said vaguely that the endless breath of life in the meridian was originally the cause of the blood of the ancestral veins delivered by Feng Qi. Shaking his head helplessly, Jian Wushuang was about to leave this circle, and Feng Qi, who was wearing a red flowing cloud and a shirt, appeared in front of him. Feng Qi's eyes lit up suddenly, and hurried up to investigate with his palm. Jian Wushuang was embarrassed and quickly protected the bare chest. How is it possible? Obviously should be able to break through that kind of state. Feng Qi frowned slightly. After tidying up his clothes, Jian Wushuang said, "What are you talking about, mysterious?" Feng Qi didn't hide it, and said straightforwardly, "When you sent me blood before, I vaguely felt that your breath has reached the threshold of breakthrough, but now why are there no signs of breakthrough? Do you think the half-ancestor level is so good to break through, which half-ancestor level is not immersed in the invincible realm for countless years, only to seize the chance?" Jian Wushuang shook his head and smiled bitterly. "As for my promotion to the invincible supreme, 100,000 years, it may take a long time to achieve half an ancestor level." Feng Qi heard the words and subconsciously bulged and said, "It seems not difficult to be promoted to the half-ancestor level. I remember that I was asleep at first, and then became half-ancestor level." Jian Wushuang was dumb for a moment, and then nodded, crying and laughing, then I will try my best. Fengqi said seriously, you are different from others. My instincts are always accurate, and I am right. Looking at the inexplicable ancestor of the Phoenix family in front of him inexplicably, his mood was inexplicably relieved a lot. After saying goodbye to Fengqi, Zhen Wushuang stepped slowly on the grassy plain. Pure divine power fills every inch of space, giving people an unspeakable comfort. Time is pressing, and the failure of the battlefield outside the territory is equivalent to the divine universe completely opening the door to the virtual universe. Zhen Wushuang had already made a decision, and when the injury of the old lord improved, he once again confronted the army of the imaginary army led by the imaginary god. And in this urgent time, the thought that had only appeared for a moment in my heart emerged again. Perhaps, should I really try to realize that kind of state? Zhen Wushuang's eyes looked far away, where Qi Ting came with a warm smile. Walk around together? All right. The two figures are here, leisurely wandering in the realm of Kangwutai, traveling through thousands of landscapes and watching countless rare and precious beasts. In the clouds, the two are like a fairy in the sky, sitting and watching the strange clouds in this realm, the mountains and the huge rivers stretch one after another, and the 4 seasons of spring, summer, autumn and winter are just transient. In this changing situation, Zhen Wushuang's mood has already changed. I am a young person who likes to play alone. All kinds of rare beasts and famous mountains and giant rivers. I am happy to go and wait and see. Later, for various reasons, I have been practicing hard so far. Although my mood has changed a little, but only the fun has not changed. When talking about the past, Chitting was a bit proud of satisfaction, so I simply moved all the things I liked before to this Kangwa Taichung. What you see is really real, yes, there really existed. Zhen Wushuang smiled, being able to maintain his original heart as always. Brother Qi's state of mind has surpassed 99 people in the world. Qi Ting smiled loudly, and looked at Zhen Wushuang much softer. Once I was born in my own way, I was born into the heavens. Looking at Wanyu was also a terrifying arrogance, but I didn't know until today that there is heaven beyond the sky. Zhen Wushuang did not speak, waiting for the following. The Kangwutai realm that I created is tens of times larger than the Luoju star territory of my family, but it is like a sea of chestnuts in the eyes of Chaos Spring. Similarly, I also know my own insignificance, and my top realm is just reaching the ceiling of the rules. Speaking of which, Qi Ting paused and said, Wushuang Palace Master, do you think that the ancestor level is the real peak? Zhen Wushuang only felt that the original cognition existing in his mind was even more confusing. The mysterious and vast land in the sad land, the strange words spoken by the snake in the extreme sea starfield, the old deity that walked out from the Blackwater River, has been mysterious to the extreme phagocytosis. All these things are uplifting this his original cognition. If the ancestor level is not the real peak, what else will it be on? He took a deep breath, and Zhen Wushuang said slowly. Chitting heard the words and smiled loudly, I don't know. Zhen Wushuang was dumb, and then shook his head, crying and laughing, which was really a big circle to return to the original place. But one thing is for sure, if you want to know more, you need to jump out of the rules that bind you. Qi Ting smiled, for example, you should break through now. Why set foot on half an ancestor? Zhen Wushuang whispered softly, it is indeed time. Countless divine powers began to spontaneously escape from his body, like the branches and leaves of the vines, to stretch in the air. Qi Ting smiled slightly when he saw this, and his body withdrew from this world. Between the clouds and the clouds, thousands of red gold gods rose up from the sky. At this moment, all the monks of the divine universe in Kangwutai were shocked to watch the direction that fainted the entire sky into golden. The half-ancestor level testimony, the road flowing, Baoguang endlessly. This guy, is it really so crazy to save the divine universe? The Emperor Taishu, sitting cross-legged, slowly stood up, his eyes unchanged as before. Chapter 46-45. This heaven and earth testimony lasted only 10 years, and even the promotion of the invincible supreme took thousands of years. All monks shivered when they saw the sky dim. Did it fail? How could he fail? 9 Tribulation King, Foam Chi, Bloodwave Supreme, etc. are all nervously looking at that direction. But for nearly 10 years, the lonely bamboo house that has never been opened once, the door was slowly pushed open, and the old man stood by the door, looking calm and calm. Chi Tinky, who has gone to several battles with Jian Wushuang, has 2 brothers. Seeing the sky at this moment, he almost blurted out subconsciously, "Brother, Jian Wushuang, won't he fail?" Chi Ting did not answer, with a faint smile on his face. "If this fails, then he is not a person I approve of." The two looked at each other and could get such an evaluation from the elder brother. It seems that this time Jian Wushuang should have succeeded. 10 years ago, the grass that was only a few inches long on the ground has now crossed the knee. The golden rhythm above the sky dome came and went quickly, and it returned to normal in a very short time. A long wind blew through, and a cloud came, and the figure with clouds and smoke around him gradually appeared in everyone's eyes. It's just that the unbridled, fairy-like air is like a cloud-like sea, but it makes Jing Kai upper body, wearing only a pair of black trousers sword Wushuang, seems more prominent. Foam Chi chuckled and laughed out loud. In her recall, this guy seemed to particularly like bursting clothes every major moment. Afterwards, Foam Chi unfolded the flow of fire clouds behind his back and took the lead in meeting Jian Wushuang. "Here you are." Reaching for a white shirt of Confucianism, Foam Chi smiled and said, "You guys can actually break through in such a short time. I really look down on you." After taking the white shirt and putting it on, Jian Wushuang smiled. Fortunately, that which escaped from Jian Wushuang's body no longer belonged to the invincible supreme power, but a kind of illusory cloud that could not tell the unknown. That is the kind of lingering cloud smoke, which is the proof of Jian Wushuang's achievement in Banzu. The originally calm atmosphere warmed up completely. The naive child rescued by Jian Wushuang in the self-empty universe stood at a distance and looked at this scene at the moment. "Sister Lan Lan, you said that the smelly chess basket has reached a very realm, even more powerful than my master." Lan Lan smiled slightly and reached out to rub the hair bun behind the childish head. "Yes, he is very powerful now, he can protect what he wants to protect." "That's good," the childish face was satisfied. "I hope that the stinky chess basket will always be stronger than my master, so that he can protect himself better." Lan Lan sighed for a moment, and sighed for a long while. "Sister Lan Lan, you said, if I wanted to be a child of a stinky chess basket, would he want me? Relax, if there is such a day, he will definitely agree." A total of 970,000 monk army, after nearly 10 years of cultivation, Yu Luo broke out of the customs, and once again launched an attack on the army of the imaginary men who invaded the divine universe. The forever figure that always walks in the forefront of the army, every time it appears, is a real transformation. In the invincible state, you can hardly shake the existence of the half-ancestor level. Now that you are promoted to the half-ancestor, who else can stop him? Standing on top of the completely broken Luoju, Jian Wushuang looked back at the boundless army behind him, holding up the Tai Luo Excalibur in his hand. War. From the extraterritorial battlefield, it has almost extended to the hinterland of the divine universe. During the 10 years since the portal opened, it has already become a dead domain. The rules of the avenue are broken, and the luck is weak. I don't know why it was affected. The star field, which has been reduced to a dead area in a large area, no longer derives divine power. Instead, a weak virtual force is born. Jian Wushuang's eyebrows were tightened, and the luck of the divine universe has shrunk to the extreme in just 10 years. Even under the influence of the virtual universe, he began to be eroded. Xingye Kaiyuan, while rushing to the extraterritorial battlefield, Jian Wushuang found nearly 10,000 troops with traces of virtual veneration in one of the Hongyong star domains that had been invaded by Shusha. Jian Wushuang directly waved his hands to kill these 10,000 virtual lords, while leaving a 6-mark virtual venerable to ask about the current situation. Knowing that most of the elite universe is still stationed in the extraterrestrial battlefield, Jian Wushuang led the army to kill all the way. In order to completely destroy the universe of divine power, almost every 10,000 traces of virtual venerable form a unit, quickly eroding the living power. The Star Kingdom God Kingdom that has been completely destroyed is no fewer than tens of thousands. In the broken extraterritorial battlefield, The city of the original base camp has already been occupied by the army of Shusha. Since the end of the Holocaust battle 10 years ago, the virtual has returned to the virtual universe and has been sleeping to this day. Although the Emperor Devourer also disappeared, his phagocytosis has always dominated the destruction plan. Wherever the phagocytosis has passed, any starfield does not leave a live mouth. When the army of nearly 1 million divine forces once again set foot in the outer battlefield, the virtual venerable guarding here retreated. With one sword out, it seems that the sword-like waterfall that divides the world into two halves surging out, and the entire base camp completely occupied by the Shusha, will be wiped out under this sword. The entire void field outside the territory trembles under this Jenny waterfall. Seeing that there were only less than 26 marks in front of him, Jian Wushuang put away the Tai Luo Excalibur and Shen Shengwei said, "Let your master raise his head and roll over to die." All the 6 marks Shuzun shuddered, and then turned around and fled. But the next moment, the huge crack hidden in the extremely dark, at the intersection of the two universes, slowly opened. 2 giant palms covering the sky with supreme fragility slowly tore apart the cracks. It was a demon ancestor with 4 horns and 6 black chains. The monstrous imaginary force surged, and under that deity ancestor, the imaginary came. That nightmare-like presence appeared. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and stepped out in one step. The same powerful and unyielding divine power unfolded from the sky, and a pair of unparalleled treasures with sublime patterns of sublime expression emerged. This is a real collision between the half-ancestral divine power and the ancestral imaginary power, but the divine power is not suppressed, but confronted. There is no sorrow and joy in the eyes of the false god, and there are endless traces of the virtual venom behind him, just like the demon from the 9 nether purgatory, covering the sky and the sun. The general trend of the divine power is gone. You arbitrarily lie in front of me, and I can leave you with a whole body. His cold voice resounded, not waiting for Jian Wushuang to speak. The demon ancestor behind the virtual had already raised his arms high and pressed toward the cover of Jian Wushuang. The giant palm surging the strange ciphertext covered the sky, but was repelled by a Chilean shout when it landed. The Kirin treasure with the power of the sun appeared behind the chitting, and the 3 strengths are full. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.